My name is Ortal Ashkenazi. I want to start my talk with a story about Anna. She's an English teacher. She teaches English in high school and she's living her dream. She's happy to get up every morning, see her pupil, and teach. In the last 5 years, she began suffering from severe period nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Every month, she has a few really hard days where she just sits in her classroom, all curly up in herself, and let a student do independent work. She is very frustrated from the situation. She invested a lot of time and money to get diagnosis. Only now, after 5 years, she was diagnosed with endometriosis. 5 years sounds like a long time, but actually she's very lucky. Usually the time between the first symptoms and diagnosis for endometriosis is between 4 and 10 years. It's frustrating. It just makes you want to scream like, ah! And endometriosis is just one example of a disease with a long diagnostic time, where patients invest a lot of time and money to get diagnosis. Sometimes it's because the disease or symptoms are spread over many medical specialties. Sometimes it's because the 10 minutes of a doctor visit it's not enough to see the full picture. Medical screening questionnaires can help in early detection of diseases. There are no medical diagnostic tools. One of their uses is to raise an alert if a patient should see a doctor to be screened for the possibility that she is suffering from a condition. In other words, the patient fill out the questionnaires, and if there is a concern that she is suffering from a disease, she will be referred to a doctor for further investigation. The problem is their production required considerable time and resources. In this talk, I'll show a preliminary investigation into the feasibility of generating screening questionnaires from social media postings. Okay. There is a really big difference in the information we share with our doctor versus the information we share on social media. The reporting frequency. Social media is continuously available. You are connected to your phone 24/7. Compare rare doctor visit. Specificity, doctor visits are very problem-oriented and time-constrained. In addition, a patient might not mention the symptoms because you think it's irrelevant for this doctor or this disease. And testing that are only available for doctor but not available to people on social media. Because of those differences, it's expected that the questionnaires that will produce from social media will be really different from the way the doctor diagnoses patients. My name is Ortal Ashkenazi. My master thesis dealt with the production of medical screening questionnaires. In this talk, I'll present Elad Yom Tov, Liron Vardi David, and my paper, Generating Medical Screening Questionnaires to Analysis of Social Media Data. So what do you think? It's possible to produce medical questionnaires from Reddit? Just so we all be on the same page, Reddit is a popular social networking site that enables users to share text to a topic-specific forum. Its forum is known as a subreddit. Subreddit is a community of interest that focus on a specific interest. Subreddits span the gamut of a lot of topics between politics, cute cat, and healthcare. Reddit users are not required to identify themselves. Hence, many of them choose to remain anonymous. The veil of anonymity in Reddit allows users to be authentic and tell about themselves really personal stuff and graphical symptoms. Medical-related posts on Reddit are made on a disease-specific subreddit, for example, for patients with endometriosis, and on general subreddit where people often request diagnostic information. The general idea is that for a disease with a long diagnostic time, a medical questionnaire is produced from Reddit data. The long diagnostic time is really important because early detection of those diseases would have a large impact on patient life. Moreover, the long duration allows a patient to report and the algorithm to detect symptoms related to the disease in the social media postings. We know that for each of those diseases, there is a specific subreddit which will provide us a cohort of patients. A cohort of patients is a group of sick users. You can see the Reddit icon with the syringe in the top. Our endpoint is a medical questionnaire and a generic method by which the physician can evaluate the questionnaires. This process is almost completely automated. The only manual part can be done using crowdsource. Now let's go over the main step of the process. Let's go deeper. Our starting point is Cyberedit dedicated to the disease. The first step is identifying a cohort of users with a disease of interest. Users wrote in the subreddit and mentioned that they were diagnosed with a condition. This is the cohort. Then, all users who didn't have history in Reddit before the first time they wrote on a subreddit dedicated to the disease are filtered. The questionnaires are based only on posting made prior to the diagnosis. The dataset used to build them include only postings from non-related subreddit written before the first time a user wrote in a subreddit related to the disease. The next step is selecting subreddit from which the questionnaire will be constructed. Subreddit that contain posting that might be related to a medical condition. This focus is needed because subreddits span a gamut of topics that most of them are not related to medical conditions, like cute cat, of course. It is done using crowdsource, this step. Okay, we haven't finished the pipeline yet, but I always understand better with an example. So let's take endometriosis as an example, Anna disease from the beginning. And the funnel you see show how many unique users we have in each step. The starting point was two relevant subreddits, endometriosis and endo. Approximately 2,000 users were found that wrote in them. The next step was to filter only users that was diagnosed with the disease. Not every user who wrote in a relevant subreddit was diagnosed. Some are consulting regarding a family member. Some fear they may have the disease, and etc. For this filtration, 200 users were manually labeled and a classifier was trained. After this filtration, approximately 1,000 users remain. The next step was to filter users who have history on Reddit before writing in a disease-related subreddit. This is to produce a questionnaire that will lead to an early detection of the disease, and to reduce the chance that posting will contain information from the medical inquiry. It left us with approximately 700 users. The last step was to focus on subreddits that contain posting that are probably related to a medical condition. The 13th subreddit that had the most posting from the most unique users was selected. Using crowdsource, it was decided if a subreddit might be related to a medical condition. We use crowdsource to generate a generic pipeline. This step was essential to eliminate very popular subreddit, but really irrelevant to a medical condition, like dogs. The 10 subreddits that the endometriosis questionnaire was constructed from were 2X chromosome, Ask a Doctor, Ashkenazi, Depression, Birth Control, Anxiety, Child Free, Off My Chest, Legal Advice, and Sex. Following, a control group was selected. Users which reported symptoms similar to the cohort but did not write in a condition-related subreddit, the subreddit from which we composed the cohort, our starting point. The control group was selected from users reporting symptoms similar to the disease on the general subreddit Ask a Doctor. Then, when we had all the control group and the cohort, a dataset was created from posts prior to the diagnosis from unrelated subreddit. Then, a set of decision rules was built to separate the control group from the cohort. A decision tree was the classifier we decided to use for this task because it's really obvious how to convert a decision tree into a questionnaire. Its attribute was whether a user mentioned one of the symptoms from a predefined symptoms group. It was necessary to group the symptoms because some symptoms are very similar, synonyms, like fatigue and tired. Seeing two symptoms with a similar meaning in two separate questions can confuse when the patient filled the questionnaire and when the doctor evaluated it. The symptoms were grouped in an unsupervised way using agglomerative clustering. Word mover was the distance metric to evaluate the distance between symptoms. Okay, so let's do a recap. Word movers was used to estimate the similarity between symptoms. Then the symptoms were clustered using agglomerative clustering. The number of clusters were varied between 5 and the total number of symptoms. For each cluster size, a decision tree was created such that its attribute were whether a user mentioned one of the symptoms in the cluster or not. So we had a lot of trees. Each one of them was evaluating using leave-one-out cross-validation. We selected the tree from which to create the questionnaires by finding the tree that achieved high AUC but did not group too many symptoms. If we group too many symptoms together, we can group symptoms from non-obvious regions like stomach pain and chest pain. And if you group unrelated symptoms, it's really hard for the doctor to evaluate the questionnaire. So this is the graph for endometriosis. You see on the x-axis the number of symptoms, on the y-axis the AUC, and in here we choose 80 clusters. Okay, the final step was to evaluate the questionnaire with the help of physicians. This is a screenshot of the GUI that's used for the evaluation. You can see we display each path of the decision tree, like an hypothetical question, and we ask the doctor, in your opinion, if a patient would respond to the questionnaires as shown here, would you refer to further investigation for the disease? And they can choose, they can score it between 1 and 5, and they write in free text comments that really help us to evaluate the questionnaire. And this is the questionnaire. This is the final questionnaire we produced for endometriosis. The terminal node showed the probability that the user responding to the questionnaire as shown in the path should see a doctor to be screened for the possibility that she is suffering from endometriosis. As the color of the terminal node is bluer, the probability is higher. As the color of the node is more orange, the probability is lower. Let's look at an example of a good agreement between the doctor and the algorithm. This path got 1 score from the algorithm and got a very high score from all the doctors that rated it. So, did the patient discuss her period? Yes. Did the patient mention that she has nausea? No. Did the patient mention that she has cramps? Yes. Did the patient mention that she has a wound? No. Did the patient suffer from swallowing? No. Okay, I hope that we'll use all the information available to us to diagnose diseases so we can live a long, healthy life. Thank you so much for your time. If you want to read more detail and more on all the technical detail of the paper, you can find us under in Google under generating medical screening questionnaires to analysis of social media data. You can contact me on LinkedIn or in any other way. Thank you so much for your time.